Shall we play a game?
Why, yes, I believe we shall.
Oh, I got a live one here.
Getting geeky in Little Rock, it's Shane Plays Geek Talk, a journey into the things we love. I'm your host, Shane Stacks. If you're listening at 1 p.m. Central on Saturday, August 10th on 101.1 FM The Answer out of Little Rock, Central Arkansas area, or streaming online, I know there's people that stream the show from as far away as Argentina on 101.1 FM TheAnswer.com. Just glad to have you. And if you're listening after the radio broadcast on by the podcast or Krypton Radio or on YouTube or one of the other ways the show goes out, I'm just glad to have you. I'm actually in the studio today. The last 2 or 3 weeks have been pre-recorded for various reasons, but I love doing live radio, and my guest today was up for it. So off we go as we trot along the edge of the cliff where at any moment things can go dangerously, horribly wrong, which leads to good energy. So, and if something doesn't go horribly wrong and is saved at the last minute, then it's not Shane Plays, by goodness. But I'm going to jump right on in there. My guest today does so much. This could be 4 shows. So I hope to have him on at least one more time to cover everything. But I'm just going to rip right on in there. I did want to let people know if they want to call in during the show, it's 501-823-0965. That's 501-823-0965. That's one of the reasons I do live radio, is so it could be interactive. But, you know, also I love radio and podcasts, which is why this show is both. And then also people can tweet, whether it's during the show or at any time. Tweet me at Shane Plays, ShanePlays. Now, with no further ado, joining us by the magical sending stones of Skype is my guest, Alex Kammer. Alex, are you with us?
I am, and I'm delighted to be here.
Yeah, man, I'm so glad to have you on. Folks, you're going to be, if you're into role-playing at all, role-playing games, tabletop role-playing games, or just learning about people who do really cool stuff, and Alex does cool stuff on multiple levels, you're really going to enjoy today's show. So I just want to, Alex, do you want to just kind of give a quick introduction? I mean, I could introduce you, but I'm afraid I'm going to miss something. So do you want to just kind of tell the listeners who you are and what you do?
I can certainly try. First of all, I really appreciate the whiff of danger with live radio. That's like any good role-playing session.
That's right.
You have to have the threat of imminent failure to really make it compelling, so that's great. So, yeah, let's see. I'll try to do it 10 words or less. I am a lawyer by actual job, but I am a lifelong nerd geek who started playing D&D in the early 80s and has been into it hard really ever since, with a few breaks here and there. So let's see. I run a convention that is known as called Gamehole Con. And in fact, this morning we just had event registration about an hour ago, and that went really well.
Right.
Gamehole Con is the largest tabletop gaming convention in the upper Midwest. It's one of the largest in the country, behind only Gen Con and Origins. So we have, for example, we have the largest D&D Adventure League hall in the country.
I did not know that. I figured that would be a Gen Con.
Yeah, no. So we're a big show. We have more support from Wizards than any other convention in the country, for example. Anyway, that's Madison, Wisconsin. I'm sitting here in Madison. Actually, in Middleton is where I'm sitting today, where my home is.
Okay.
Anyway, that's Gamehole Con. It's a tabletop gaming convention, so it has everything from board games to miniatures to lots and lots of RPGs. And that's really it. I mean, we have a great big dealer hall and all that kind of stuff, but we don't have the ancillary fan con stuff. So, you and I, we met at North Texas RPG, which is a delightful small show down in Texas. Just imagine a much bigger version of that.
Okay.
Formal dealer hall and things like that. And but instead of 400 attendees, we'll have 5,000.
Right, and it's tabletop RPG focused.
Tabletop RPG, board games. Actually, board games are about 40% of our show.
Really? Okay.
And a very strong and growing contingent of miniature games of both fantasy.
Okay.
And
yeah, you did
historical.
say that, and there was a good representation of that at North Texas as well. So, I would, if I had to characterize it, RPG conventions or gaming conventions in like the 70s and 80s. Were focused on like tabletop RPGs and miniatures because they're in wargaming, because there was a lot of crossover. I'm not sure if board games were big. I know at like the original Gary cons and things like that they were, because it was like wargaming that turned into RPG gaming. I would say your con is like going to a con would have been in the 80s if you like to play RPGs. Would you characterize? That's how I felt like North Texas was.
Yeah, I think that's fair. We have, that certainly is the largest single category of game that we have,
right.
Role-playing games, and that's from every system. I mean, that goes from, all kinds of old obscure stuff to lots and lots of D&D 5e, newest Shadowrun,
right.
Pathfinder 2nd edition, whatever. So if you like to play role-playing games, this is the show for you.
Right, and by the way, when I say it, it reminds me of what cons would probably been like. I mean that as a compliment, because I have no problem with Comic Cons. They're fun, but when I go to a convention like North Texas, I feel like I'm home, because everybody there is it's a lot of cons, and some people get off on that, and that's fine. I mean, everybody has their different things they like to do for fun, but a lot of cons are like this wild mix of all kinds of things. Just kind of, you got cosplay, you got anime, you got comic books, you got TV shows, you got movies, you've got all kinds of stuff, and then there may be a room or two of gaming, and I go to those two and have fun. But when I go to a convention that, like, I know the focus is I can play games nonstop and meet a lot of other people who that's their main interest too. That like I said, I feel like I'm at home.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And as far as the board gaming contingent, I mean, we're really in the golden age of board games. We've never
It's amazing.
It's crazy. So, that's why we have such a robust board game scene. And, if you take a look at our guest list, we have, bar none, the greatest guest list in the industry, far better than Gen Con, far better than any other show. That's a really big part of our show, to have industry leaders in terms of designers, authors, both board games, RPGs, and so on. People come from quite frankly, around the world to be guests at our show, and because it's not the madness of Gen Con, but it has all the things that Gen Con has, just in much more manageable and consumable sizes. One thing that I loathe personally is standing in line. I just can't stand it. It's just a personality defect or whatever. You can characterize it any way you want, and it won't happen at our show one way or another. So we keep scaling and making sure that never happens, because, I've gone to the PAXs and so on like that, and I enjoy them too, but I'm just unwilling to stand in line to go have 30 seconds with someone. It's just not my jam. If it's yours, that's great, but you don't ever have to do that at our show. That's just not the kind of show that we run.
Yeah, I was just talking about somebody about that recently. And, I'm going to refer to North Texas some because, that's one where you and I met, and I really appreciate John Peterson introducing us. And it was just a fascinating, I actually did a podcast covering North Texas. And then I also talked about Victorious for, Mike and Elizabeth Stewart, that just hanging out at the kind of the bar / restaurant area that night. It was like John Peterson and Bill Meinhardt and yourself. And then there was I need to reach out to John and get his name. There was the guy that works with Wizards of the Coast that works in the archives and finds all kinds of really cool stuff in the archives. So, quick footnote, the individual in question is Kurt Gould. He works for the logistics department at Wizards of the Coast, but also either had deep access to the archives at one time, or maybe still does. But anyway, evidently he's found some really neat stuff. And then Zeb Cook just walks up and starts hanging out. So it's and everybody's just chatting and having a good time. And everybody that was at North Texas, even the special guests, were just there. They were hanging out. They were completely approachable. You could talk to whoever you want at any moment. And I'm like you, they'll say, hey, so-and-so is going to be at this con. And you're like, great. And then people stand in line for 2 hours for a 5-second interaction. Now, if they collect autographs or if that's meaningful to them, more power to them. But to me, I don't feel like I had a real interaction. I feel like I had like a McDonald's, Happy Meal or, fast food. Okay, you had your moment. Now go for the next person, is what I feel like. So I'm not, when I go to cons, I usually don't go for the special guest, because the chance of actually having a meaningful, interaction with them and talking, getting to know who they really are, anything like that is pretty slim. But I do go, I like the vendors and I like the games and I like, hanging out with like-minded people and all of that stuff. So I do want to circle back to Gamehole Con. That's one of our main topics today. So I want to, we will revisit that. But one of the things that really impressed me when I met you that night at North Texas, and this is usually an icebreaker question to warm the guest up, but for you, this is going to have a much deeper significance, and it's actually one of my topics I want to go to. So, Alex, do you happen to collect anything?
That's funny. Yes, I do have a little bit of a thing. There are a few of us out there in the world that basically have definitive collections of all things TSR, and I'm one of the few. My thing is so Gamehole Con has such a funny name, and I don't mean to steer us back in that direction, but I want to give this explanation.
Sure, go ahead.
Because undoubtedly some of your listeners are saying, Gamehole Con, what the hell kind of name is that? Well, it's named after my gaming group, The Gamehole.
Right.
And the Gamehole has existed for almost 20 years. The same group of players, we've been getting together forever, and it was in my basement forever. That's where it was physically located, where my collection was housed, where the gaming table was, where we'd gather and play these awesome games for years and years and years. So when it came time to, are we actually dumb enough to try to run our own convention? We decided and said it has to be Gamehole Con. That's the only way that makes sense. But anyway, the Gamehole is an actual physical place. It exists above a pub I own now, and it's a 3-room suite above a pub, and it has one of the largest collections of vintage D&D TSR in the world. I have a complete set of everything published from start, when you talk about, chainmail, first print, through the late 90s when TSR got bought out by Peter Atkinson and Wizards of the Coast, in original shrink wrap. So I have a set of original shrink wrap, but I also have all the rares. I have some rare stuff that others just don't have. Bill Meinhardt has some stuff too, and John has a John Peterson you mentioned. There are really literally 5 of us in the world that we're all friends.
Right.
And that have this stuff. There are another subset are art collectors, which I have a few things, but that's a different depth of water and a different type of person who's into the original artwork. It's I have some expensive stuff, but man, you can spend some real dough if you want to, try to get the original deities. Yeah, that stuff is crazy. So yes, I have a massive collection. In fact, I game the table that sits in the Gamehole is Monty Cook's old gaming table. And that's what we play on every week. And surrounding this are shelves and display cabinets of all kinds of rare, awesome things that, sprung from TSR, from just down the road from me here in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, and so on. So yes, it's and part of the experience of Gamehole Con when for guests who come is we have a reception at my pub, and then they go upstairs and can check out all the stuff. Like I've got the original Forgotten Realms maps,
right? Like the original maps, the
original ones that Ed Greenwood sent to and received by Jeff Grubb. I've got those. I've got the original known world maps from Lawrence Schick and Tom Moldvay. They used in college and eventually became the Mystera background, the background for the Mystera campaign, and the Gazetteers, which are one of my favorite product lines. Stuff like that. So, and many times during the year, I'll get a ping from someone, anyone out there, and said, I throw this out to anyone who reaches out to me and said, hey, I would like to come visit the Gamehole. And I say, sure. At a time that makes sense to me, I'll meet you down there and I'll let you in and we'll show you around and you can show you whatever you want. I do have sort of people making pilgrimages to the Gamehole, which is
that's great.
Pretty humbling and cool. So yes, I have a problem with my collections.
Well, one of the reasons it fascinates me so much, a couple of years ago, I started getting into RPG collecting and because I started seeing more RPGs showing up at general Comic-Cons, like you'd have, comic vendors. Well, I'm seeing more and more RPG vendors. In fact, I had about a year ago, Overstreet is now putting out a guide to collecting tabletop RPGs and board games. And so I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. This is, and I thought I was doing pretty good with the stuff I was collecting. And then I ran into you and Bill and I think Mike Wu, at North Texas, and Bill pointed out one guy because he was walking me around and showing me stuff. And by the way, I'm definitely trying to have Bill Meinhardt on the show. He has, from what I understand, the the largest fantasy RPG collection, if I understand that. I believe that. And he carries around that huge binder with everything. He's like, bam, and he opens up and he points out his collection, and you're giving him like good-natured teasing about it. But he told me at one point, he said 4 of the 5 top world-class RPG collectors are here right now. And you were one of them. He was one of them. He pointed out somebody else. And it opened my eyes to how big that the scene really is. I had no clue. So I'm going to do a show on it in the future. You'd be welcome to join. I'm also going to start doing a series of YouTube videos where I take retro RPGs I found and just kind of, okay, here's where I found it. Here's how I got it. Here's how much it cost. And then here is some history behind this RPG. So I think there'd be some desire for that out there, and it would be personally fun for me to do that. But yeah, I'm working with Bill to have him on. He expressed interest. He's called and we've emailed a little bit to give an idea of why I think this is important. And I'm going to recap a story I told on the show, podcast, radio show after North Texas RPG Con. We're all sitting there at the table, just hanging out, just talking. Zeb Cook comes walking up, and he's like, man, I just ran a game for like 11 people. And, if people who know TSR history, Zeb Cook's a big name. And you guys are like, hey, you want a beer? He's like, yeah. So y'all bought him a beer. He's just sitting there drinking a beer, hanging out. And then you and Bill Meinhardt start having this discussion about tracking down memos, like actually the original memos from like assistants and secretaries about the negotiations between Zeb Cook and TSR. And Bill, and I'm paraphrasing. I mean, you can add to this if you remember the discussion, but it's like Bill would be like, well, I've got this. And you're like, yeah, well, I found this. And Zeb's just sitting there kind of hanging out. And what I said at the table, and I'll rephrase it. See, your passion, you and people like Bill and yourself, your passion, you did it because it was a passion for you. But we have this massive explosion of tabletop RPG influence in pop culture right now. And so what you've actually been doing is pop culture archaeology that is going to be incredibly important to future generations. That really impresses me on a level that it's actually kind of, I get tingles thinking about it because what was just fun for us is actually going to have an impact on future research and stuff like that. So do you have any thoughts on that?
I certainly do. When people, I describe my collection, they see my collection, they think, geez, and I feel, I guess I'm such a Midwesterner, I feel almost embarrassed that I have all this stuff, right? Yeah. It's almost like a show off kind of thing. And I really, the impetus, first of all, I kept all my stuff from when I was a kid, and I'm also just sort of a completionist nerd anyway. But the reason that I became obsessed with this windmill tilt of collecting an original shrink copy of everything is that I wanted to have a perfect set that could be preserved, a perfect set that could be endowed. There will be a time, and we're getting closer to an actual RPG D&D museum, and I'm going to gladly, my relics, I'm never going to sell anything. I never have done any of this for profit. This is all, I'm happy to buy these things and preserve them. I feel it's part of my responsibility as a responsible member of the collecting community. For example, I have one of my brown boxes, the original wood grain D&D box, going to a culture museum out in Seattle that they're going to display. And for years, the fellow that you talked to from Wizards, who is actually in logistics for them, that's what he does. He had his brown box, and he just wants it back now. So they're looking for someone else that had an original, really nice shaped brown box. So that's going to go. I can't remember what the name of the museum is. It's right underneath the Space Needle. It's a really cool cultural pop museum in Seattle. Anyway, that's going out there. I'm happy to share that. I have several brown boxes, so I'm happy to have one go, and so people can go see it and see where D&D actually came from. So absolutely, this is a big deal, and Bill does a wonderful job of being an archivist as well. We talk about conservation techniques. I have a photography background too, so there's a little that helps when it comes to the science of maintaining
of actually
paper,
preserving the material.
Yeah. There's a little you can make mistakes with that. So absolutely, I think it's a responsibility that we all have, and it's cool, especially with, as you so adroitly said, the explosion of Dungeons and Dragons in the popular popular culture, and also the tendrils throughout popular culture that aren't even most people don't even expressly realize that they came from D&D. That is all there, and it's going to be more important. And I think it's going to be as with 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons being so massively popular, and thousands of new players every week joining us. I think making sure that these goofy memos and letters in your company mail and all that stuff, so you can see how tenuous that was at one point, how close it came to tipping over, and how goofy some of the stuff was. It's wild. Yeah.
Well, they were making it up as they went along. They didn't know. They were just like, hey, they literally did not know. I mean, it's obvious that Gary Gygax, from a business perspective, understood that, hey, this could sell well, and we've got a little bit of lightning in a bottle. But I cannot imagine that anybody, Dave Arneson, Gary Gygax, any of the other big names from the other games and companies, had any idea of the cultural lightning in a bottle that they were messing with. I think they were just having fun making games.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. That's abundantly clear.
Yeah. So, it's like, and then you get the business side. But I think, we mentioned John Peterson with his Playing at the World book, of course, Michael Whitwer. And then, they've got the Art and Arcana, which is more than just an art book. It's a history book of D&D told through art, and the stories behind the art. And then people like yourself and Bill Meinhardt and others that are collecting, and not just collecting to turn around and sell or to get off on it, but collecting to preserve. It's going to be really important because more and more people are coming out, writers, actors, directors, and talking about how formative Dungeons and Dragons and other tabletop role-playing games were on them and becoming storytellers. So a lot of the fiction, a lot of the shows, a lot of the movies we wouldn't have, or they would be different without D&D. So in some ways, I think that it's just as impactful as the comic book culture explosion we're seeing happening. And it's interesting, Alex, I think you can relate to this. I went to high school in the 80s, junior high and high school, and the cultural cool chic cachet was not there at all.
to say the least.
To put it mildly, in some cases you downplayed or hid, your love of RPGs, not among your friends or whatever, but now it's like, it's celebrated and it's cool and it's hip, and like I don't know if you read they did the Rick and Morty versus D&D comic book miniseries that Pat Rothfuss helped write and Jim Zub. And it begins with Rick's grandson wants to learn D&D to impress a girl. And I mean, that's just such a flip, from what it would have been, years ago, which is good. I'm ecstatically happy. Well, and I do not want to do anything as unmannerly as to ask you what you think the value is of your collection. I don't want to go there, but how many items do you have? Do you mind sharing that?
Oh, I don't mind. I just don't know. That's a good question. Oh, gosh.
Like 5? You have like 5 things?
Yeah. Oh, geez, that is interesting. No one's ever asked me that. That I have, it's many bookshelves.
Right.
Bill has more stuff than I do, but I've got a lot of stuff too. In fact, I'm trying to not acquire things anymore. He has a collection that does, all fantasy. So he's getting all the third-party publishing stuff and, all that stuff. And I don't. I'm really, focused on TSR, D&D stuff. So I have many thousands, but the upper number, I just don't know. Or certainly with exact. I have a spreadsheet. So of course this is especially given what I do for a living as an attorney, it's my collection is insured properly. What that means is that each item that I have, there's a photograph of it, and it goes. That photograph is saved, that image is saved, and there is a spreadsheet that has the stock number, the condition that I've graded it as, and description of any defects or anything like that, and the printing and all that. So it's all laid out. So that is all knowable. I've just never counted them.
All right. So
yeah, but lots of stuff, man.
More than 5, less than $1 million.
Yeah, like if you look at consider the original D&D AD&D hardbounds, I probably have I would say of each book, I probably have anywhere between 10 and 15 copies when it comes to the different printings and misprintings and signed ones by Gary and things like that.
And does it have the wizard or the lizard man?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they have all the, and the flyleaf for the red flyleaf for the original Monster Manual and so on. So you go through all these printings just to give you an example. So whatever, that's upwards of 100 books right there, so
a bunch. So you got a bunch. All right. Well, and I'll just say, another reason this is important, and I think that what like John Peterson and yourself and others are doing, because it's just a fact of life that we're entering a phase where more and more of the people that were there at the beginning we're losing. So, it's very important to get that documented. And like Zeb Cook, that was so cool. I just, he was watching you guys and listening, kind of smiling. And I said, I got to ask. I said, I'll kick myself if I don't ask as a radio host or a podcaster or whatever, from an interview perspective. I said, how does that make you feel, like psychologically, to hear this discussion? And he like kind of took a swig of beer and he went, man, it's weird. And I went, well, is it good weird or bad weird? And he kind of ruminated and took another swig of beer and he went, man, it's good weird. And I was like, all right, cool. And so that kind of sums it up,
Yeah.
But well, here's what we're gonna do. When I do a live show, I have to banter with my engineer Zach, or dire things will happen that I'll talk about here in a minute. But when we come back, we're gonna do that. We're gonna have a break. When we come back, we're gonna talk about Gamehole Con some more. And then, I also want to talk to you about your RPG design and True Dungeon. Whether we have time to get into all that or not, I don't know. But, the door is open and we can do a part 2 at your convenience. So, because you do so, and now you also own a pub. So I've got to add, further to the list of all the things you do. So, I'm like, how do you do it? You must have more energy than my 5-year-old. But just so you know, Alex, if I don't banter, and I'm in hot water because we've pre-recorded for a couple of weeks, if I don't banter with my engineer, Zach, okay, so the head of my news team, Sal, all right, it's not him, but his grandmother and her dog, Muffin, get upset with me. And strange things have happened, okay? We've got ongoing drama with Muffin, and we're starting to think that at first we thought the grandmother was under Stockholm Syndrome, but now we think she's just straight up, like, Muffin is running the show and the grandma is kind of held, she's in the wake of everything going on. And poor Sal can't do anything about it. So, and in fact, Sal, well, I'll tell Zach here in a second. I'll update him on that. He normally does our news and everything. But folks, again, when we're going to talk to Zach, we'll take a break, and when we get back, we will be continuing to talk with Alex Kammer. I got to know, Alex, if you were a rapper, would your rap name be A-Cam?
I'm known as you know what, you missed it the year before. The guys at North Texas roasted the hell out of me at the midnight auction, and because I self-applied the handle that I'm the Flava Flav of 5e. Yeah, that I was out promoting. I'm like, hey, you got to look at this new rule set. It's really sweet. This is what's bringing everyone in. So they roasted the hell out of me. They made a big clock for me and all that kind of stuff. So I guess I'd have to roll
daring to defend 5. And just so folks know, North Texas RPG Con is a small, intimate. Now, any game goes. If people want to play a game, 5e is fine, but it's got to focus on OSR and retro gaming. So so it sounds like you got a little bit of backblast there. So
friendly.
Gary Con, Gamehole Con, and North Texas RPG Con are considered sort of the trifecta of cons that support OSR and retro gaming. Is that right?
That's true. They're all a little different, but yeah, those are, and we're all good friends. Luke Gygax is one of my, I consider my very good friend, and Doug and Mike at North Texas. Jesus, I mean, we've been buddies for years. Right. So yeah, it's a great group of people.
But anyway, back to Zach. So Zach, how the heck have you been, buddy? I'm in hot water, man, because we haven't bantered in like 3 weeks.
It's been a long time.
Have you what have you seen a movie or anything lately that you like?
Gosh, I can't even think of the recent movie. Because I'm going to see Hobbs and Shaw tomorrow, but I can't think of the most recent one.
Have you seen? I'm hearing good things about Alita Battle Angel.
That was good when I saw that. Me and Dave saw that.
Did you? I've heard good things about it. And then Dave is raving about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
That was actually a pretty good movie. Now, he knows more of the references because he grew up in the time. But it was a good movie.
And Alex, feel free. You can chime in during any of the stuff if you want. But yeah, Zach's usually the big movie guy. So are you watching TV, any geek TV or anything?
I've been watching Titans on DC Universe.
So the first series,
the second
series. Here's the thing on Titans. It's technically done well, and it's got good, but I don't understand why they made it so dark. That is some dark stuff, you know. And the source material has never been dark like that.
Okay.
Now, like Swamp Thing was dark.
I haven't seen that yet.
But Swamp Thing they could justify it by being dark.
Right.
But I still am completely puzzled why they made Titans so dark.
And you know what? And Robin or Mr. Grayson,
Nightwing.
The way they made him so brutal.
Yeah.
I'm like,
I don't get it.
Wow.
Well, and then Jason Todd is like a psycho almost. So I don't know. But I'll tell you, I've been really impressed with DC Universe. Mm-hmm. Titans, like I said, was well done.
Okay.
But I don't appreciate how dark it was because it doesn't fit the source material, in my opinion. I love Doom Patrol.
I'm going to get to that next.
Doom Patrol is just, if anybody's ever read a Grant Morrison comic book, I never thought they could do a TV show version, but they did.
My friend, he watches it. He said he loves it too.
Yeah, it was good. Swamp Thing, and then I've been watching the new Young Justice. The Young Justice stuff
Outsiders.
is good. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So anyway, all right. So here's the deal. The Mobley Detective Agency sent me another memo, and we're still getting weird chatter off of Muffin's mobile phone and text messages and everything about this Operation Uno Fingers, but they can't put everything together. I don't know if you noticed, Sal has been gone for a few days, and Miss Pennyfingers, they're off getting married. So yeah, Miss Pennyfingers came in just a few months ago. Everyone loves working with her. And her and Sal have fallen in. It's an office romance, and they're off getting married right now.
Wow!
So I'm hoping next week or two to get a report on how that's going. Mm-hmm. But with that, we're not really doing a news segment today. I did want to congratulate Stephen Picorni and Satine Phoenix on Destination Fantastic. Every now and then I'll have a guest on for a Kickstarter or whatever, and it's interesting or whatever. But after they told me what they were doing with Destination Fantastic, I personally took a stake on, I really hope that this funds. And a couple of days ago, they had like $50,000 to go, and they just blew it away and funded and within a couple of days. And that really, really impressed me. And then, of course, Michael Tierney and Kursova Magazine worked together on the Wild Stars ongoing comic book novel. That had a run on Indiegogo, and now it's on Kickstarter. So Wild Stars 4 is on Kickstarter right now. It'll be in the show notes, and people can go to just Kickstarter and search for Wild Stars 4. And then I was just real briefly, since we don't have a news chief right now, since Sal wasn't around to do the news, I was gonna put Alex on the spot. Can you play the news sound there? I'm gonna put Alex on the spot. There you go. There's the news sound. They're working hard on a Saturday. Alex, do you have one thing or one impression from Gen Con that you want to share?
Yeah, I do. Gen Con was what was remarkable to me was in the dealer hall how many board games there were that were not for sale. What I mean is that they were board games that had been developed and were in Kickstarter, and they paid the extremely high number to have a booth at Gen Con to talk about their game, which they could not sell you. There were several times I was talking to someone about a game. I thought, hey, that sounds really cool. I'll take it. Oh, you can't. You can pre-order it.
Yeah,
that's amazing. But that's over and over and over again. That happens in any dealer hall. But this was the year of the funded Kickstarter but not yet produced game at Gen Con. It was really weird.
So these Kickstarters, they weren't trying to get them to fund. They were already funded, but in order to get it, so you could pre-order. I heard somebody else, it may have been you. It was actually on the North Texas RPG Con Facebook page. Somebody was joking around and said, yeah, like 30, I think somebody was asking about the vendors at North Texas, and somebody chimed in and said, yeah, 30% of the vendors at Gen Con were all Kickstarters. I was like, well, that's interesting. So do you think that's a flash in the pan, or do you think that's a trend? And what do you think about that?
We all have, us nerds who've been watching Kickstarter for years and participated and had some heartbreaks. It is always a little troubling when you see a funded Kickstarter that has not delivered spending money in ways that do not directly go toward getting their game to the people who back the product.
Right.
And trips to Indy and Gen Con, that is the most expensive show to attend in terms of an exhibitor or an attendee. Man, was that money well spent for everyone there? I don't know. I hope so.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of for whatever reason I've been labeled one of the sort of the more business nerd kind of guys because of all of my various interests in gaming, and that did not strike me as sound judgment in my opinion. But again, I don't know the math behind each of these Kickstarters, but there were a lot of them. So to answer your question, that was a long way. That's a terribly lawyerly answer. I think we're not. I don't think that's going to continue with that volume. That just doesn't make sense to me.
Right. Well, there's also a less chance of walking away because, a lot of people go to Gen Con and they come back with their haul, right? Mm-hmm. You go to a con, you come back with your haul. Well, that impacts your haul. Like, well, there was this great game, but I can't show it to you. So I don't know. I'm not in their shoes. So, but yeah, you're not the first person to comment on that. So that's interesting that was your takeaway as well. So, all right, I'm going to throw out some show notes. We'll get to a break. When we come back, we're going to continue talking to Alex Kammer, the Flava Flav of 5e, also known as ACAM, also known as the symbol formerly known as ACAM. And we're going to be talking to him hopefully he's got this cool thing he does called True Dungeon, and he's done some RPG design. We'll cover what we can. And then, maybe we'll have Alex back on another time or just do a side podcast to cover more ground because the Flava Flav of 5e cannot be contained in an hour. That's all I can tell you, folks. He can't be contained in an hour. But anyway, here's some show notes. If you're listening by podcast or on Krypton Radio or the YouTube version or anything like that, you can go to shaneplays.com. That's ShanePlays.com. And the show notes for today's show will be up. But anyway, last week's show is on the blog and on the podcast. So it's episode 194, Axis and Allies Online with Beamdog, and that they've gone into early access and had a chance to talk with them. And I've gotten a chance to play Axis and Allies Online now. Pretty fun stuff if you're an Axis and Allies or war game fan. The podcast, as I said, does go out on the blog at shaneplays.com, iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher, Podbean, SoundCloud, YouTube, and more. And last but never least, Shane Plays is carried on Krypton Radio. Krypton Radio is sci-fi for your Wi-Fi. KryptonRadio.com. What are the dates of Gamehole Con, Alex?
Yeah, this year we are October 31, Hallows Eve, through November 3rd. So Halloween through the Sunday of that weekend. So,
okay.
Yeah, we're excited.
Cool. Very cool. We'll learn more about that after the break. And speaking of the breaks, I'm going to get us there now. Zach, go ahead and take us to the break. Are you a fan of thrilling adventure, daring suspense, and just a touch of romance? Cursova has you covered. Since 2016, Cursova has been publishing the very best in contemporary fantasy and science fiction, retro pulp, and for you D&D gamers, Appendix N style fiction. Based in Little Rock, you can pick up their flagship magazine locally or at Michael Tierney's The Comic Book Store on Treasure Hill Road or Collector's Edition on JFK in North Little Rock. Swing by one of Michael's stores and pick up an issue or find them on Amazon. CIRSOVA, doesn't start with a K, it starts with a C. CIRSOVA, Cursova Magazine. Check them out today. And speaking of Michael Tierney's comic book shops, comic book lovers, head to Michael Tierney's local comic book stores for the newest books on the shelves, plus a fantastic selection of back issues. Visit the Comic Book Store on Treasure Hill Road in Little Rock and Collector's Edition on JFK Boulevard in North Little Rock. And don't forget to click on over to the wildstars.com. Michael Tierney knows comics. In addition to being in business for nearly 4 decades and publishing his own comic book series, The Wild Stars, for almost as long and still going, he has written multiple columns for comics magazines and is an Overstreet Price Guide advisor. Michael is also the author of the wildly successful, high-quality, 4-volume labor of love, the Edgar Rice Burroughs 100-Year Art Chronology. Remember, for all of your comic book needs with friendly service, make sure to visit the Comic Book Store and Treasure Hill Road in Little Rock, Collector's Edition on JFK Boulevard in North Little Rock, and thewildstars.com to learn more. Tell them Shane Plays sent you. And last But never, ever, ever least, I want to go ahead and throw out some love to Game Goblins. Some goblins are your friends. Game Goblins is Central Arkansas's premier retailer of Magic the Gathering, Warhammer 40K, board games, card games, RPGs, miniatures, and hobby accessories. Call Game Goblins at 501-224-GAME or visit them online at gamegoblins.com. That's 501-224-GAME or gamegoblins.com. Conveniently located at 1121 South Bowman, right on the corner of Bowman and Canis in West Little Rock, and staffed by friendly employees, Game Goblins has expanded their store size, and there's plenty of room for exciting inventory and tables for play space. You'll like that space because Game Goblins has gaming events every day of the week. For all of your gaming needs, I heartily recommend Game Goblins. Make sure to check out their customer loyalty program that rewards you based on your actual purchases. Game Goblins earns your business and keeps it. First-time customers, mention Shane Plays and receive $10 off your purchase of $50 or more. Tell them Shane Plays sent you. And folks, if you do visit any of my sponsors, please tell them that you hear about them on the show. That helps them know that their advertising money and the relationship we've built is time and money well spent.
Shane Plays Radio is blessed to have sponsors, and we appreciate them very much. However, did you know that you can also support the show as an individual for as little as $1 an episode? Simply go to patreon.com/Shane Plays.
Hey, we're back on Shane Plays Geek Talk, a journey into the things we love. Call-in number if you're listening live on Saturday, August 10th is 501-823-0965. You can always call me, or you can always tweet me at Shane Plays, ShanePlays. We got about 10 minutes left, roughly. And my guest does so much that I'm like, there's no way we're going to cover everything. So I'm going to give him the option of what he wants to focus on. But this is Alex Kammer, who runs Gamehole Con. He's also a world-class, and when I say world-class, I mean a world-class TSR/RPG collector. He does RPGs design. He's designed some RPG stuff, and he does this really cool thing called True Dungeon. And he also owns a pub, and he also evidently was the first person to climb what is the big one? What's the big mountain? He was the first person to climb Everest solo, and he discovered Alaska. No, I'm just joking. And he's also the Flava Flav of 5e, according to North Texas RPG Con. So, Alex, we got about 10 minutes left. Now, just so you know, you're always welcome to come back on and continue the discussion.
Sure.
So what would you, and I want to real briefly, I want you to tell people the whys, who, what, when, why of Gen Con. You emailed me and said, oh my goodness, event registration just went live, madness. And you mentioned that earlier. So, tell people, give the elevator speech on Gamehole Con, and then, whatever else you want to talk about, the time is yours. So.
Wow, I appreciate that. I guess, so let's see. Gamehole Con. Yeah, Gamehole Con is, it's been interesting because it's grown so explosively. And I think the reason is that, you mentioned that if you could build a show, it would look like North Texas. Well, that's what we did with Gamehole Con. We're a bunch of nerds who were missed the fact that Gen Con left Wisconsin, leaving a big void for us. And so we started this goofy show. We didn't know if it'd be just us and a couple of our friends standing around in a hotel lobby. But we had almost 500 attendees the first year, so bigger than any North Texas show from year one, and it's grown really fast. And I think the reason is because we have such a focus on the attendee experience. Our prices are low for badges, cheaper than any other show to go to in the country, and we provide a tremendous amount of experience when you do buy a badge. It's because we're not trying to make money. The guys and I all have jobs. We all have vocations, we all have businesses. We don't need this to be a moneymaker for us. So this is really a joy, a passion project for us. That's why it's got a goofy name. That's why there's all kinds of silly stuff going on there. It's got a very upbeat and fun vibe, and people dig it. And we have amazing attendee retention. Shows like Gen Con and PAX, they're around in the 60% range. We're in the mid-90s. Once you've come to our show, you come back. So I'm very proud of that fact. I think we do a great job, despite how busy we are. I mean, there are 9 of us that are full-time dads and business people and employers and all that kind of stuff. But we still do a great job with customer service in terms of responding to emails and sorting out people's problems, whatever they may be. So anyway, I'm very proud of what we've done with Gamehole Con in such a short period of time, and to be known as one of the pillar shows in the country, not just in the OSR community, but again, for example, we have this massive 5e AL presence where Wizards acknowledges us as their sort of flagship show.
Well, yeah,
it's
because
just really cool.
That's where I first heard about it, because I remember there was one year, it was just a couple of years ago, because y'all have only been around since 2013.
Exactly.
So you've grown. All that focus on the attendee experience is paying off. It was a year or two ago, and all of the quote unquote big name people on Twitter that were in the D&D/RPG world were going to Gamehole, going to Gamehole, going to Gamehole. And I'm like, what is Gamehole? I think that year Mike Merles and Christopher Perkins and I was like, whoa, where what's this Gamehole thing? So, and so I'm really glad that focus is, paying off for you. It doesn't hurt, like you said earlier, that we're in this golden age of, board games and tabletop RPGs, but that doesn't diminish, the heart and the hard work that you're putting into it. So,
no question. The wind is definitely at our back these days, for sure.
And and we said right before the break, but what are the dates again this year?
Yeah, October 31 through November 3. So it's Gamehole. The nice thing about a weird name like Gamehole Con is you won't forget it. So if you just splash that into Google, you'll get all kinds of information. Registration is going on now. I just during the break, I was scrolling through the events list. We have 3,000 individual gaming events, and there's still lots of tickets available for different things, which is great. I want to make sure that our walk-up customers, attendees, still have lots of good options. So yeah, there's lots of stuff still available at Gamehole Con. And speaking of Chris Perkins, that's a great example. What a great guy. He and I I've been fortunate enough to become good friends with him. He's been to each and every Gamehole Con since we started, and he just doesn't go to other shows.
Dude. I've had him on the show a few times. He is legit. Given his status in the hobby, he is a legit dude.
Yeah, no, I agree. He's such a mensch. He's such a good guy.
Yeah.
And he really cares about the product. He lives and dies, D&D. And so it's pretty cool.
All right. So it's October, basically the last days of October this year.
Yep.
Okay.
31 Halloween through November 3.
Okay. Very cool. So Gamehole Con, folks, check it out. It's in Wisconsin. So go check it out. That's the Wisconsin is the ground zero for a lot of this hobby. So how far away are y'all from Lake Geneva? If people want to take a side trip,
about an hour away.
So people can take a side trip over and check out Lake Geneva. So okay, so you've got about 3 or 4 minutes left. Did you want to talk about True Dungeon a little bit, or did you want to promote any of your RPG products?
True Dungeon is an entire subject in and of itself.
Okay,
and it's an immersive experience that takes 2 hours when you go through. It's the single biggest event at Gen Con. It's also at Gamehole Con, Origins, and a couple of the PAX shows. It's a really cool theatrical experience. Google that. There are some wonderful videos and explanations.
Let me offer you this. This is an odd circumstance I find myself in. I'm booked out for the next several weeks, but I happen to have next weekend open. If you just happen to want to do Alex Kammer Part 2 and talk about True Dungeon and your RPG design. Now, if that's not a good fit for you, that's fine, but I just happen to have it open.
It very well may be. I have to look.
Okay,
I
well,
think
let's
that's
talk.
fine. I think, August has been good
I've never done that before. I've never done a Part 2 with a guest. It just happens to work out, but there's just so much to talk about with what you're doing. It like you're saying, it's hard to just shove that. It's like, well, let's schedule a future show on RPG design and True Dungeon, whether it's next week or not. I'll give you another show. Happy to do it. Now, so do you have any of your special guests lined up for this year's Gamehole Con?
Oh yeah, I mean it's cool. You mentioned, for example, how it's cool to be a D&D player now. It's just so funny, again, if you're of our vintage, how funny that is just as a concept. But, like Deborah Ann Wall is coming to Gamehole Con.
Yeah.
Matt Lillard is coming to Gamehole Con.
Yep.
Joe Manganiello is probably coming to Gamehole Con. He's a good dude, and he wants to come out and play games with us. I mean, it's crazy the status of our game now. But then we have Mike Merles comes every year. Chris Perkins comes every year. We have a lot of good Call of Cthulhu guests. That's one of my favorite games too. That's a whole other subject. I just love BRP games. But Mark Morrison is coming from Australia, which is a real treat for our attendees. I played in a Call of Cthulhu game. Man, is he a good keeper. Wow, what a great game. And Rick Meintz is coming from Chaosium, so you can have a chance to meet him and play some games with him. But you can go look at our guest list, and it's full of all kinds of really interesting people. And like North Texas, here's the deal. I tell our guests, there's no coming to our show and hiding in the room. You can't do that. And everyone knows that. And so they're available and around. And so even though we're a bigger show, it still doesn't feel like it. And, the moment it does feel claustrophobic, then I'm going to make changes.
Right.
Like the hammer of the gods will strike, because that's not going to go.
No, the Kammer of the gods. I know you've never heard a pun on that level before. I know. Just like I've never heard smokestacks or anything like that. All right. Well, I'll tell you what. How much time we got left there, Zach? What are we at time-wise, Zach? We got about a minute and a half? Minute 40. 1 minute 40 is what we got. I'll tell you what, folks, check out Gamehole Con. Pay attention in the future. I'm going to be talking more about RPG collecting. I want to personally thank Alex and folks like him that are collecting to preserve and investing their own money and not just trying to enrich themselves. So thank you very much, Alex. This hobby means so much to me, and I know it means a lot to you, and it's more than just a game. So it's been a huge part of my life. So thank you and others like you that are preserving and have a respect for it. Check out True Dungeon. Go look up True Dungeon, and then look up Alex Kammer and his RPG design. But hopefully we'll have him back soon to talk about more of his stuff. Now, Alex, I hope you got the waiver. I know you're a lawyer and everything, so you know the importance of this. But I end the show every week with a bad joke of the week. So if there's any mental cruelty, I hope we got that waiver on file, because it can be pretty bad. So here's the bad joke of the week, Alex. What does a zombie vegetarian eat?
Oh boy, the floor is yours. I don't know.
Grains.
Oh, of course. Well done. I'm going to go right now, and I'm going to inflict that on my children. They're going to love that.
All right. Remember, if there's any mental cruelty, I deny any responsibility whatsoever. Because I live in America. The responsibility can't be mine, right? So,
exactly.
Anyway. Alex, it's been a pleasure. Good luck with Gamehole Con and everything you do, and I hope to talk to you again soon.
Yeah, very soon. Let's do it.
At that time, Rico Drayton, which is now called Flava, he lived in Freeport, and I got him to drive my truck. And he would I would pick him up every morning. I'm responsible for that clock that he wears on his chest, because every morning he was supposed to be at our house at 7, and I would be in my kitchen waiting, and he wouldn't show up, so I would jump in the car and go down to his house, and his mother, Mrs. Drayton, would come to the door, and I would say, "Is Rico up?" And she would say, "No, Mr. Right now, he's just getting up," or something like that. And he would come to the door and say, "Oh, Mr. Right now, I'm so sorry I'm late." And so that would happen every day, and finally one day he come to the door and I said, "Why don't you get a clock and put it on your chest with an alarm? And this way you'll know what time it is." So that's basically where that clock came from.
So you owe some royalties, basically.
Yeah, he never gave me a dime. Never gave me a dime.
Shane Plays Radio is blessed to have sponsors, and we appreciate them very much. However, did you know that you can also support the show as an individual for as little as $1 an episode? Simply go to patreon.com/ShanePlays.